It was a calm Tuesday morning in May 2025 when Ibrahim Traoré, the 36-year-old president of Burkina Faso, sat in his presidential office in Ouagadougou, preparing for what would become one of the most explosive international interviews of the year. The BBC had requested a live global broadcast, and Ibrahim had agreed. Unaware that his words would send shockwaves through Washington, D.C. and beyond, his press secretary, Moussa Kabor, knocked on the door with the final briefing notes. Mr. President. The interview will be broadcast simultaneously on BBC World, CNN International, and France 24. Expected viewership is over 50 million people worldwide. Ibrahim nodded calmly, adjusting his navy blue suit. At 36, he had learned to handle international pressure with the composure of a seasoned statesman. Despite his young age, Any specific topics they want to focus on? He asked. Economic development, regional security, and Moussa hesitated. They mentioned they might ask about recent American foreign policy in Africa. Ibrahim smiled slightly. He had been expecting this. Recent tensions between African nations and the Trump administration had been escalating, and as one of Africa's most vocal young leaders, he knew the spotlight would eventually find him. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., President Trump was having his morning briefing in the Oval Office. Vice President JD Vance sat across from him, reviewing intelligence reports from various African nations. Sir, said National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, we should be aware that Ibrahim Traoré is giving a major international interview today. He's been increasingly critical of our Africa policies. Trump looked up from his papers. That young guy from Burkina Faso, what's he going to say that matters? JD Vance interjected. Actually, Mr. President, he's been gaining significant influence across West Africa. His economic reforms have been surprisingly successful, and other African leaders are starting to listen to him. Trump waved dismissively. Let him talk. We'll handle it if he says something stupid. Neither Trump nor Vance could have predicted what was about to unfold. Back in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré was in the presidential broadcast room, where technicians were making final adjustments to the cameras and lighting. The room had been carefully arranged to showcase Burkina Faso's cultural heritage. Traditional masks adorned the walls alongside modern art, and the country's flag stood proudly behind the presidential chair. Sarah Mitchell, the BBC's senior international correspondent, had flown in from London specifically for this interview. She had covered African politics for over 15 years and knew that Ibrahim Traoré was unlike any leader she had previously interviewed. President Traoré, she said during the sound check. Thank you for agreeing to this live format. I understand you prefer direct communication. Ibrahim smiled warmly. I believe in speaking directly to the people, Miss Mitchell. Too often politicians hide behind carefully crafted statements. Today, I want to speak from the heart. The interview was scheduled for 3 p.m. local time, which meant 9 a.m. in Washington, D.C., perfectly timed to catch the American morning news cycle. Dr. Alphonse Ouedraogo, Burkina Faso's foreign minister, sat in the corner of the room, slightly nervous about what his president might say. Ibrahim had a reputation for being refreshingly honest, sometimes to the concern of his diplomatic team. In Washington, President Trump was finishing his morning coffee when his chief of staff mentioned the upcoming interview. Sir, the State Department suggests we monitor this. Traoré has been critical of our trade policies recently. Put it on the big screen in the Situation Room, Trump decided. I want to hear what this kid has to say. JD Vance joined the president along with several senior advisors. They settled in to watch what they assumed would be a routine interview about African development. Secretary of State Marco Rubio connected via video from Miami, where he was attending a Latin American summit. Gentlemen, he said through the screen, we should take this seriously. Traoré carries real influence in West Africa, and his words tend to resonate across the continent. At exactly 3 p.m. Ouagadougou time. The interview began. Sarah Mitchell's opening was standard. Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and I'm here in Burkina Faso with President Ibrahim Traoré for a special live broadcast. President Traoré. Sarah Mitchell began, her voice carrying across continents. Burkina Faso has experienced remarkable economic growth under your leadership. How do you respond to critics who say your success is unsustainable without Western support? Ibrahim leaned forward slightly, his eyes focused and determined. Ms. Mitchell, that question itself reveals the problem with how the West views Africa. Why do you assume our success depends on Western support? We have been governing ourselves for decades. In Washington, Trump raised an eyebrow. This guy's got some attitude, he muttered to JD Vance. Sarah continued, but surely international partnerships, particularly with the United States, remain important for Burkina Faso's development. Ibrahim paused for a moment, then delivered the words that would change everything. Ms. Mitchell, let me be very clear about something. The United States talks about partnership, but what they really want is subordination. President Trump and Vice President Vance seem to believe that Africa should be grateful for their attention. But frankly, we've learned to succeed without their help. The Situation Room in Washington fell silent. Trump's face reddened slightly, and J.D. Vance leaned forward in disbelief. Did he just? Vance started to say. Ibrahim wasn't finished. African nations are not charity cases waiting for American salvation. We are partners in global commerce, contributors to world culture, and leaders in innovation. When President Trump visited Africa 3 years ago, he spent more time talking about what America could extract from our continent than what we could build together. Sarah Mitchell realized she was witnessing something historic. President Traoré, those are very strong words about the current American administration. They are truthful words, Ibrahim replied calmly, and sometimes truth makes people uncomfortable. President Trump campaigned on America first, but what he practices is America only. That approach doesn't work in our interconnected world. In Washington, Secretary Rubio's voice crackled through the video connection. Mr. President, this is exactly what we feared. He's undermining our entire Africa policy on live television. Trump was unusually quiet, watching intently as this young African leader systematically dismantled American foreign policy assumptions with surgical precision. J.D. Vance whispered, Sir, we need to respond to this immediately. But Ibrahim Traoré was just getting started. Ibrahim Traoré continued his measured but devastating critique, his voice remaining calm while his words cut deep. Let me give you a concrete example. Ms. Mitchell, last year Vice President Vance visited Ghana and made a speech about American investment in African infrastructure. But when our own companies bid for those projects, they were systematically excluded from the process. Sarah Mitchell was frantically checking her notes, realizing this interview was becoming front-page news across the globe. Can you elaborate on that, President Traoré? Certainly. The Tamarport expansion project in Ghana. American companies won the contract despite Burkinab and Ghanaian firms submitting lower bids and having better local knowledge. When questioned, Vice President Vance's office said it was about ensuring quality standards. But what they really meant was ensuring American profits. Asterisk in Washington, JD Vance's face had gone pale. The Airport project had indeed been controversial, and Traoré's information was accurate. Asterisk. How does he know these details? Vance whispered urgently to his staff. Asterisk Trump was no longer dismissive. This young president was proving to be more formidable than anticipated. Asterisk Ibrahim leaned back in his chair, his confidence growing. President Trump recently tweeted that African nations should be grateful for American generosity. But let me ask, where is this generosity? American companies extract billions in resources from our continent annually. They pay minimal taxes, employ mostly expatriate workers, and ship raw materials to be processed elsewhere. Asterisk Sarah Mitchell interjected. But surely American investment creates jobs in Burkina Faso. Asterisk Ms. Mitchell, that's exactly the patronizing attitude I'm talking about. We don't need America to create jobs for us. We create our own jobs. Since 2022, Burkina Faso has created 340,000 new jobs, built 28 new factories, and increased agricultural productivity by 67%. We did this through partnerships with China, India, Turkey, and Brazil, countries that treat us as equals. Asterisk the Situation Room erupted in whispered conversations. National Security Advisor Sullivan was taking rapid notes while Trump sat frozen, watching his Africa policy being dismantled on live television. Asterisk. Furthermore, Ibrahim continued, President Trump's recent trade sanctions on 3 African nations, including my neighbor Mali, were imposed without consultation or warning. Imagine if we imposed sanctions on Texas because we disagreed with American domestic policy. The hypocrisy is staggering. Asterisk JD Vance finally broke his silence. Mr. President, we need to cut this interview short somehow. He's destroying our credibility. Asterisk Ibrahim Traoré wasn't slowing down. If anything, he seemed to be gaining momentum as he continued his methodical dismantling of American-African relations. Asterisk Ms. Mitchell, let me share something that will surprise your viewers. Last month, a delegation of American businessmen visited Ouagadougou. They offered us a generous trade deal. Asterisk Sarah leaned forward, sensing another revelation. What kind of deal, President Traoré? Asterisk, they wanted exclusive rights to our lithium deposits essential for electric car batteries. In exchange, they offered us 2% of the profits and promised to build one processing facility that would employ 200 people. Ibrahim paused for effect. The same week, China offered us 45% of the profits, technology transfer for 3 processing facilities, and training for 5,000 Burkina engineers. Guess which offer we accepted? Asterisk in Washington, Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo, who had been listening from her office, immediately called the Situation Room. Asterisk, Mr. President, that lithium deal was classified information. How does he know those exact figures? Asterisk Trump's hands were clenched into fists. Someone leaked. He growled. Ibrahim continued his economic lesson. This is what I mean by partnership versus subordination. China, India, and Brazil negotiate with us as equals. They understand that Africa's growth benefits everyone. But America still thinks in colonial terms: extract resources, export jobs, import profits. Asterisk JD Vance was frantically texting his communications team. Prepare immediate response. This is a disaster. Asterisk, the numbers don't lie, Ibrahim said, pulling out a tablet. In 2024, American direct investment in Burkina Faso was $127 million. Chinese investment was $2.3 billion. Indian investment was $890 million. Even Turkey invested more than America, $340 million. Yet, President Trump expects us to prioritize American interests. Asterisk Sarah Mitchell realized she was witnessing diplomatic history. Asterisk President Traoré, these are very serious allegations about American economic policy in Africa. Asterisk, they're not allegations, Miss Mitchell, they're facts. And facts don't care about political sensitivities. Asterisk in the White House, Trump finally exploded. Get me a direct line to this guy now. Asterisk, but his staff knew it was too late. Ibrahim Traoré had already fired his biggest ammunition, and the world was listening. Asterisk. The tragedy? Ibrahim concluded this segment, is that America could be Africa's greatest partner. But first, they need to abandon their superiority complex and start treating U.S. with respect. Asterisk the interview was only halfway over, but Washington was already in full crisis mode. Sarah Mitchell decided to push further, sensing that President Traoré was willing to go places most diplomatic leaders wouldn't dare. Asterisk, President Traoré, you've made very serious criticisms of American policy. How do you respond to those who might say you're being ungrateful for American development aid? Asterisk Ibrahim's expression hardened slightly, and for the first time in the interview, a flash of genuine anger crossed his face. Asterisk? Ungrateful? Ms. Mitchell, let me tell you about American aid to Burkina Faso. Last year, we received $23 million in aid. Do you know what strings were attached? He looked directly into the camera. We had to buy American products, hire American consultants, and use American shipping companies. By the time all these requirements were met, maybe $8 million actually reached Burkina people. The rest went back to American pockets. In Washington, Trump was pacing the Situation Room. This little punk is making us look like fools. He snapped at JD Vance. Sir, maybe we should focus on damage control rather than, don't tell me about damage control. This kid is embarrassing America on live television. Ibrahim wasn't finished, but here's what really bothers me about President Trump and Vice President Vance. They have never set foot in a Burkina village. They have never spoken to our farmers, our teachers, our doctors. Yet they make policy. Decisions that affect millions of my people. Sarah sensed this was becoming deeply personal. Are you saying the American leadership doesn't understand Africa? Asterisk. I'm saying they don't want to understand Africa, Ibrahim replied firmly. Last year, Vice President Vance gave a speech at Georgetown University about helping Africa develop. He spoke for 45 minutes and never once mentioned what Africa could teach America, not once. Asterisk JD Vance felt like he was being punched in the stomach. That Georgetown speech had been one of his signature foreign policy addresses. Asterisk. President Trump tweeted last month that African leaders need to get serious about governance. But let me ask, who has governed better? Trump inherited a stable America and left it more divided. I inherited a Burkina Faso under terrorist attack and have restored peace and prosperity. Asterisk. The Situation Room was dead silent. Ibrahim was essentially calling out the former and current president on their leadership records. Asterisk. This is unprecedented, whispered National Security Advisor Sullivan. Asterisk. Ibrahim leaned forward, his voice taking on a more personal tone. Asterisk. Mr. Trump. Mr. Vance, if you're watching this, and I know you are, here's my challenge to you. Asterisk. Ibrahim Traoré looked directly into the camera, and millions of viewers worldwide felt as if he was speaking personally to